Everybody. All right. So we're gonna get right after it here today. Again, if you're comfortable and willing to, it's helpful for me if you're willing to turn on your camera. I promise no judgment if you're eating or got a mouthful of something or didn't do your makeup this morning. We're all we're all in this together. That's for sure. Merle, what's that behind you? Please stop dreaming. Never stop dreaming.
Never stop dreaming.
Love it.
This used to be Sharon's room. The girls have taken it over, and they don't like the closet doors on this closet, so they bought a shower curtain and hung it.
Hey, there you go.
That's the world I live in. Is dreams and two little girls.
It's their world you're living in. Exactly.
Right? We are living in their world, no question about it, and loving every minute of it.
100%. Right. Well, thanks everybody for making a little bit of time to hang out today. I'm happy to get to be with everybody. One of my favorite Torah portions this week, we're reading Parshat Yitro, Jethro, Moses's father-in-law, ultimately. And lots of interesting things that happen in this Torah portion, right? Famously, one of them is that Yitro gives Moses some advice that he shouldn't be trying to do everything all by himself and that he should ask for help. And certainly any of us who are in relationships with in-laws or are in-laws, not always easy to give advice like that. And also famously, 10 Commandments appear for the first time in this Torah portion. Our ancestors at the foot of Mount Sinai receiving the first set of tablets with Moses and that whole dynamic, which leads to something that I thought might be interesting to explore a little bit today. Not any of the 10 Commandments, actually, which is probably what most rabbis out there are teaching about today. But this idea of God, giving the Torah to our ancestors, and this relationship that basically is created between God and the Jewish people, the Israelites, which leads to what I think is one of the most fraught ideas about and in Judaism, and also one of the most misunderstood ideas about and in Judaism, which is this idea of the Jewish people being, quote unquote, chosen people, right? Chosen by God. I think it's something that probably some of us on this Zoom are maybe uncomfortable with, because I think there's this sense that there's a privilege that is associated with that it's there's a superiority that may be associated with that. And I think that actually, hopefully, 45 minutes from now, I actually think that's not really what the notion means. So we're going to look at some text. We're going to look at some ideas and some commentaries kind of talking about this throughout, different periods in Jewish thought and Jewish history. Hi, Susan, Lorraine. So fun having more friends just pop on here. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so right off the bat, here we have this piece from the book of Exodus from this week's Torah portion, which I'll just read. I'm going to read the first couple, and then we'll kind of talk about them and get a little bit deeper into it. So, okay, Exodus 19, verses 4, 5, and 6. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, God says, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now, therefore, if you will hearken to my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be mine own treasure from among all peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Right? Seems pretty straightforward, right? God is singling out our ancestors for, this special status, special relationship, I suppose, is a way to say it. A little commentary here from Sforno, a commentator who says that a kingdom of priests to the entire human race, so that they may call in the name of God to serve God together, right? That this is an idea that we are sort of God's emissaries right, amongst all the other peoples. Again, pretty traditional ways of looking at this. Skipping ahead toward the end of the Torah, right, another piece from Deuteronomy making the same point, right? God says, for you are a holy, actually this is Moses saying, for you are a holy people to Adonai your God, and Adonai has chosen you to be his treasure out of all peoples that are upon the face of the earth, right? And Rashi, again, points out that that for you are a holy people, your holiness stems from your forefathers, and moreover, God has chosen you. Right? So, before we get deeper into this, my question is, how does this sit with people? Is it something people have thought about? Is it something that's problematic? Is it something that we don't really care about? Okay, I see a hand. I'm going to scroll through here. I see Brad. Go ahead.
Well, it was always my understanding that we were chosen to be in a suzerain vassal relationship with God, that it's not that we're particularly special in any way, but we are in a relationship of mutual obligations. We have obligations to God, God has obligations to us, and that's what makes the relationship special.
I think that's beautiful. I would agree with you. Kathy, I see you have a hand up there. No, maybe not. Kathy, you're muted.
Brett, come here.
No, okay.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Sorry, they may take you a minute to get through. And I see Claudia, I see your hand too. Go ahead.
What does it mean that the Reconstructionists do not believe that we're the chosen people?
Ooh, great question. So interestingly, there's a quote or text further down in this source sheet from Mordecai Kaplan. Mordecai Kaplan was a professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary, among other places, in the beginning of the 20th century. I don't know that he would consider himself necessarily the father or forefather of Reconstructionist Judaism, but certainly his teachings, Kaplan's teachings, most famously in a book called Judaism as a Civilization, or as a Civilization, it sort of became foundational ideas of Reconstructionist Judaism. For those who don't know, Reconstructionist Judaism, to oversimplify, in all fairness, in essence, rejects the notion of Jews as the chosen people, and actually goes so far as to change the language in a few, but two that come to my mind immediately. Two different blessings, prayers that we know pretty well. One is the Elenu, right, originally part of the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, that has made its way into every service, right? To remove this idea of Jews being chosen from among, all the other peoples. And the other is the Torah blessing that is recited when people come up to say, for having aliyah to the Torah, which also harkens to this idea of Jews being chosen, Bachar Banu. And they actually changed the language to remove that idea. So I mean, at the risk of giving away where hopefully maybe I'm going to end this in half hour or so, 40 minutes. My argument would be, what does it mean that Reconstructionist Jews have done that? I would say, in a way, it's an overreaction to an issue that's not really an issue, in my opinion. To lay my cards on the table, I'm going to hopefully get us to a place, at least in my own opinion, which is that, as I said, I think it's a misunderstood notion. I don't think it's about superiority. I think, as Brad said, it's about a relationship in which, we have responsibilities and God has responsibilities. But I think that, chosen doesn't necessarily mean better. And that's, I think, hopefully what we'll explore a little bit today. I also think, interestingly enough, without getting into a whole commentary on Jewish denominations and movements and all of that, I don't know necessarily, but my sense is that the vast majority of folks who are part of Reconstructionist Jewish communities are not a part of them necessarily because they have major issues with this idea of Jews as the chosen people. They're a part of them because they like the community, and it's the shul that makes sense for them. I have family that are very involved at Kehilat Israel in the Palisades. I believe is still the largest Reconstructionist synagogue in the country. Right? I haven't really talked to them about it. I don't think that they have any issue with Jews as the chosen people. I don't think they even know that that's really what the synagogue or Reconstructionist Judaism is about. They know that it's 6 blocks from the house, and they like the religious school, and they like the rabbi, and it's their community and their home, right? And I wrote a paper about this many, many years ago as an undergraduate, actually, that, in the non-Orthodox world, people join synagogues because, well, I grew up at a conservative synagogue, so I guess I should join a conservative synagogue. Or, well, this is the prayer book that I'm used to, so I should join a synagogue that the prayer book's the same. Or, Wilshire Boulevard Temple Religious School, they have a 1-day-a-week religious school option, and that doesn't mess up Bobby's soccer schedule, so we're going to join there. Well, we live, in the flats in Beverly Hills, and Sinai Temple's the closest synagogue, so conservative, whatever, like it's the closest spot for us. It's 4 blocks away, and we don't have to sit in traffic to get there, right? So I think that in the non-Orthodox world, ideology, much less theology, is pretty far down the list generally in terms of why people pick certain communities. They pick it because their friends go there. They pick it because they like it. It feels good, all of which are great things, right? So there's a very long answer to the question that was asked as to what does it mean that Reconstructionist Judaism sort of distances itself from this idea. But I think that what is, I think, instructive is, at least to me, the fact that an entire movement, denomination, as it were, was birthed in essence in an attempt to distance itself from this notion, I think speaks to the very fact that it is fraud and it is, problematic for a lot of folks, and that a lot of folks think about. So I'm just looking in the chat here. Merle says that it's being chosen as an expectation of how we should behave and live our lives in order to be the chosen world. That's beautiful. Responsibility to do mitzvot, Douglas says, yes, absolutely. Right. And I think that's another piece too, right? I think there's a piece of responsibility, absolutely, that comes to this. Claudia, you had a hand up. You've been patiently waiting, and I'm going to scroll through others.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I think that, people are uncomfortable because the text that we just read and other, parts of it is the text, and it makes it sound as if there is a certain, specialness about, being Jewish, and we can wrestle with it and twist and turn it. And, we talked about it, and I was uncomfortable about this too. And some people explain it as if, well, we were chosen to just be like a beacon unto our people, and we just should behave in a way that, inspires or, other people. But still, that puts us on a pedestal, I feel. But I love what Brett said about mutual responsibility. That's a great interpretation. From a historical point of view, I think they also wrote that maybe for a host of reasons that we can debate. But am I right in saying that Judaism was the first religion to introduce monotheism?
I think that's a fair statement, yeah.
Or at least the first large.
Yeah.
So to me, being chosen also represents that, the fact that we, our ancestors decided to abide by, the one God, and stood by it in the face of, other peoples around them who did not believe in that, and went out, if you will, and proselytized, a word that we don't like to use. But that's my thinking.
I think that's beautiful. I'm going to interject one thing, and then I see more hands. Don't worry, I promise I'll scroll through and get to you. But Claudia, what you said made me think about something, and I also want to qualify something I said about Reconstructionist Judaism, which is one of the other tenets, at least as I understand it, of Reconstructionist Judaism is this idea that, different peoples are on different paths to the same one monotheistic, one source of unity, God, whatever we want to call it, right? Christians may have a path, Jews may have a path, Muslims have a path, and no one path is necessarily any better or privileged over any other path. It's just, the Jewish path is best for us, right? I by no means say that I don't think Judaism is the best religion in the world. I think it's the best one for me, right? Doesn't mean it's better for somebody else. And that is very much a, what I would call a Reconstructionist tenet. I think what is interesting, Harold Schulweis, of blessed memory, was the Rabbi Beau Shalom forever, and a giant in the Jewish world. Rabbi Schulweis was famous for standing up on the bima and saying, "I'm a Reconstructionist Jew, and I'm a conservative rabbi, and I believe we're all on different paths to God, but I see no conflict between that and Judaism writ large and conservative Judaism." Right? I don't think that actually those are two incompatible ideas. Right? So the idea again that chosen doesn't necessarily mean, in my opinion, superior or better, right? I think that different, and we'll explore this more in a moment, but I think that different people can be chosen for different things, right? I heard Rabbi Leader many years ago, I think it was Rabbi Leader, use the example of having multiple kids and choosing one kid to take out the trash and another kid to load the dishwasher. You're chosen for different things. It's not better, it's just different, right? Susan, I see your hand up.
Okay, I was just listening to you with Rabbi Schulweis. I was going to start the video. I can't get on the video.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Okay.
now,
There we go.
there we go. Several things. I think you're not going to like hearing this, but the further away you get from the original and people not knowing the full picture, the more problems they have with that. Because it states in the Bible, I chose you not because you're larger, you're better, you're wiser, you're craftier or whatever, but because you accepted my commandments and you accepted the one God, which also states I would emphasize responsibility. And I love you because you're doing this. And it's our reason we're chosen to make a better world and better communities and to keep the commandments. I would point to the Midrash where God went around to other nations and asked them,
Not male.
what?
Not sorry.
Would you accept my
Ignore that.
the strictures here of being Jewish? Does it entail circumcision? No way, we're not doing that. Others who make nations who get profit from wars and the bounty, can't do that.
Yep.
No, so he went that keep the Shabbat. I can't give up that day. So finally, the Jews accepted. And another midrash is that he held a mountain above their heads and at Mount Sinai and said, "Will you accept it?"
Right. Make this deal or die. Right.
That's right.
Yeah. It's funny, Susan. Even before you said it, those two examples were flashing in my mind. Right. This notion that the Jews weren't chosen because our ancestors weren't chosen as superior or better. They were the only ones silly enough to make the deal. Right? Nobody else wanted this deal. And after schlepping it and peddling it to everybody, finally, the Israelites are like, okay, we'll take it. But I think another piece of that you're getting at, Susan, is this idea that being chosen also, I don't actually think is necessarily a passive thing.
No.
Right? We can choose to be chosen, right? Right now, I'm looking on my screen. There's 4 or 5 hands up, right? Well, I'm going to call on Lorraine in a minute, right? Well, Lorraine, by raising your little virtual Zoom hand there, you are choosing to be chosen by me, right? That's a piece of it too. that is being willing to engage in the relationship, being willing to put oneself out there. On that note, Lorraine.
What I think is really beautiful is that a lot of the thoughts that I had on my mind, many of you share as well. So it makes it very comforting to see that we're all mostly on the same page. I have three items, right? One, I do agree with what you're saying in regards to, I see this relationship more of a siblings in a relationship with a father, and not to ascribe God in anthropomorphical, role, but somewhat of that type of relationship where you have multiple children and they have different abilities, and therefore they have different roles within the household. So by virtue of that, I do see by extension that what Susan is referring to, not that those children, neither of them are special. It's just that they all have different abilities and you are honoring that within them. And that being said, I chose Judaism for myself. I wasn't born a Jew. I chose Judaism. I think it's very special. It affords me to connect in a very special way to God. And by extension, then I also have some responsibilities to abide by certain commandments. And that's my action, so that I could continue to experience that unique way of engaging with God. So yeah, while I don't see that Jews in itself as humans would be any more special than any other person next to us, our neighbors, Judaism in itself, I think, is a very special way of engaging with God.
I think that's so beautifully said. I would say two things just that I think about, given my own biases and what I've devoted a lot of my rabbinate to. Yes, you chose Judaism, but I think Judaism also chose you. And I would say I did something, for those who heard my Rosh Hashanah sermon this past year about choosing Judaism, I would say actually every single one of us, 24 of us or whatever on this Zoom, chose Judaism. We may have been birthed it, but by sheer nature of the fact that you're on a Torah study Zoom at 12:26 on a Friday afternoon and not, having lunch somewhere, you're choosing Judaism, right? And so it is, I think, very much this two-way street, right? That we choose to be a part of, Judaism in the broadest sense, and that, yeah, maybe we are also chosen to be a part of it, but it goes both ways, absolutely. I want to get to I saw a few other hands, and then we'll keep going here. Okay, we're going to get a little further. I want to get past the kind of more traditional ideas and interpretations here. This is actually one of the texts that Susan was referencing from Deuteronomy, that God didn't pick us because there were more of us, or there were the most of us, or the best, but picked us because we were willing to do this and take this deal. So I'm going to push a little further here to a more contemporary quote text here from Lou Silverman, right, 21st century, right, who says, the more extreme and exclusive interpretations of the doctrine of election among Jewish thinkers were partly the result of reaction to oppression by the non-Jewish world. The more the Jew was forced to close in on himself, to withdraw into the imposed confines of the ghetto, the more he tended to emphasize Israel's difference from the cruel Gentile without. Only thus did his suffering become intelligible and bearable. This type of interpretation reaches its height in the Kabbalistic idea that while the souls of Israel stem from God, the souls of Gentiles are merely of base material, right? Which I skipped this. This is the quote from the Zohar here, which is frankly, I think a problematic notion, right? Part of the other reason, just to go back to it, to Reconstructionist Judaism, changes, and the Reform movement also actually omits, in classical Reform Judaism, omits the second paragraph of the Elenu prayer, is because, to paraphrase, the prayer basically speaks pretty unkindly about non-Jews. Thanks God for not making us like them, because they, worship false gods, in essence, right? Which is this sort of particularistic idea. What I think is interesting about the Silverman piece is the notion that perhaps this sort of particularism was actually a kind of self-preservation that developed, in places all over the world, and in times in which Jews were made to feel separate, different, and that there was some solace, right? I mean, I can remember being bullied as a kid at school, and I don't remember word for word my mother saying something to me to make me feel better, that like basically it was the other kid's fault that they were bullying me, right? I probably did have some agency and was probably, had some responsibility to bear in the situation, right? But I think that is, I think, a very common kind of human and psychosocial, way of reacting to that tension that I think comes up here in this Silverman piece. I saw a hand, maybe not. Okay, we'll move on a little bit. Now we're getting into sort of what I would call classical Reform, early American, as it were, maybe Judaism. Isaac Mayer Wise, in large part, in essence, really the father of American Reform Judaism, right, late 19th century here, says the idea of the Jews returning to Palestine is not part of our creed. We rather believe it is God's will that the habitable world become one holy land, the human family one chosen people. Judaism, he declared, was a worldwide religion. The Jews' nationality is not endemic. It is not conditioned by space, land, or water. The Jew's nationality is not in his blood. It is all intellectual and moral, without any reference to soil, climate, or any other circumstance. The Jewish nationality has been made portable, right? This is, I listen to this and think how much a product of its time it was, right? Susan's nodding her head, right? Early Reform Judaism was what we now call classical Reform Judaism, right? Really, really concerned about issues of dual loyalty, right? I mean, I could take Isaac Mayer Wise's name off of this and put Edgar Magnan's name on it, and it would be just as appropriate, right? Questions about, are you really American? Are you American enough? Don't you have a dual loyalty to another place, right? And this real sense of Jews, first in Western Europe and Germany, and then in the United States, really, really, really trying to say, no, we are just like you. We just go to our Jewish church, on Wilshire Boulevard, right next to all the other churches that were built right at the same time. And we go on Saturday and you go on Sunday, but we're the same, right? We're all in this together, kind of trying to universalize these ideas. Susan, I saw your hand go up.
Nobody calls on me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't, who is it? I'm sorry. There's no name.
I have a, hello?
Yes.
Me? I'm sorry. I'm on my phone, so maybe it doesn't work.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see a name or a hand. Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Lisa Beth Harris. Sorry. I'm
Hi,
doing
Lisa.
this.
How are you?
Hi, good. I'm sorry. I'm on my phone. I usually do on my computer.
No, not at all. I'm glad you're here, and thank you for chiming in.
Sure. So I originally had some stuff to say about the first. We moved on.
Please. No, by all means, though.
I have to say something about this commentary because, and it's the thing that comes up for me all the time when I'm in Torah study, which is that I'm sorry, but the religious notion that you can ignore social science as a Jew, meaning, this notion that I get it, we're all the same, which is also very product of today, this universalism that is in vogue.
Yeah.
But everybody knows that's ever studied any foreign country that part of the affliction, and I will say affliction, of being a Jew is that you had to be a German and a Jew. You had to be a Kazakh and a Jew. You had to be a Ukrainian and a Jew, because we don't live in a vacuum. And, you know, you might also say that we were also chosen to suffer and to see what we would do with the suffering. And people don't want to talk about anything negative. They want to make this, I'm feeling like this conversation is going towards this sort of flowery, hippy dippy, universalist, we're all in it together. Well, yes, we're all in it together, but our path, however it was formed by the Torah and social science and everything else mixing together, is not the same path.
Yeah. Lisa, I think it's a phenomenal point. And I would say, by the way, I also just, to dance on the head of a pin for a second, say we're all in it together doesn't mean we're all the same.
Right. But
I agree with you so deeply that I think we are very much living in a world and in a time and in a city, particularly, that teaches our kids, for sure, that it's a melting pot and differences are bad.
Well, right.
We shouldn't think about those things, and that particularism is somehow inherently bad. And I think Judaism, to your point, I think Judaism says no. Judaism says no. We are different. We're not the same as everybody else.
And what is it else? We're also different by not what we choose, but by what happens to us.
Yeah.
And you know, I was raised as a Reformed Jew and everything else, but now but when you're raised as a Reformed Jew, there's no discussion of what Reformed Judaism is. You just go and you just show up. And, you know, I think just that it bothers me that the discussions are often absent of the things that have happened to us. And if you believe that God chooses everything and he chose us for something, you have to equate it with the other things. And also just how difficult it is to be both a Russian and a Jew, or a Chinese person and a Jew, you know? And I don't even want to discuss the universalism that's being talked about now, because it's just a product of political correct bullshit. It has nothing to do with anything real. It's just a way that people are now because they want to talk.
Yeah, I think that, and then we're gonna move a little bit further, but I think that yes, the notion that, you know, different is inherently value laden is I think problematic. I think it comes up, you know, I have conversations with families all the time who say, well, no, I don't want to send my kid to a Jewish day school where they're only going to be around other Jews, right? Why would I want to do that? Well, because they should be just like everybody else. Well, there's the whole rest of the world and AYSO to be just like everybody else. This is an opportunity to engage, you know, with other Jews. And for those of us who grew up in places where, you know, 50% of our neighborhood wasn't Jewish, the way it is in parts of West LA, right? We know what that's like. Right? To have to explain. I remember having to explain to my teacher in high school, no, Yom Kippur is not the one with the matzah. Right? Merle knows really well because she was there with me when I was a rabbinic intern and student rabbi in Yuma, Arizona, of all godforsaken places. But it's not a joke there. You know, special order matzah 3 months before Passover. Otherwise, there's not going to be any. Right? Our kids grew up in a world where you walk into Ralph's and there's a mountain of Passover, you know, stuff a month ahead of time, and everybody knows what Manischewitz is. That's a different world, right? So this idea of being Jewish as being different, and generations of Jews, the vast majority of Jews who have ever lived, I think, have at many times felt that sense of differentness. And I think running away from that or minimizing that, I think, is not, you know, to our benefit. Merle.
I just think
what you said about Yuma And also, when we moved here to Scottsdale 46 years ago,
which is incredible because you're 37, but
thank you. There was one synagogue. Well, there was one Reform and one conservative way on the other side of Phoenix. And we didn't join right away because we were like, this is just too far to go. And with Arnie's business, you never know what time he's going to be home. So, but as temples grew here, and now there's one on every block practically, people that weren't Jewish, and Sharon went to the local schools, you know, down the street from us, where there were 3 Jewish families in a whole high school. And people would look at her, you know, and these other 2 kids who happened to live down the street from us, they were like, what is this? You get holidays off, that you don't come to school. And what is this? Your mom works where? At a temple? What's that? You know, and so you get they close on your holidays, but, you know, and you get to go to work with her, but no, you're going to services. That was very difficult for her growing up to explain, because she didn't want to drag us into it. And I think that's part of this whole difference thing, is what is it? That's why I think that this whole thing is about how we're expected to act. That, you know, it's like Sharon would come home sometimes and say, I don't want to try and tell people. People would say to me, well, what does it mean that you're the chosen people? Well, how do you explain this when you're 12 to somebody? You know, and then you invite your non-Jewish friends to your bat mitzvah, and now the rabbi, who is used to what goes on in this community, or then, would have to explain to people the differences and what a bar bat mitzvah is at that time and is now, and the differences. I think that's a big piece of this when I think about how it's chosen. I mean, we have a friend who's not Jewish who is not going to convert, but during the pandemic, she found Wilshire Boulevard Temple to be her connection to whatever, and is now, she wasn't raised anything, I don't think, but she finds that Judaism is a comfort zone for her. So that's another level, that's a different kind of chosen.
Well, and Merle, I you know, what really stuck with me in part of what you shared is this idea of action, right? Of behavior. And we're going to get there's a text about this a little bit further down the sheet here, but right, one of the things, and many folks have heard me talk about this before, you know, one of the church's ancient critique of Judaism is that it was a religion of deed, not creed, right? I happen to agree with that. I just don't really think it's a critique, right? Judaism, for better or worse, is a tradition that privileges behavior over belief. And so part of, I think it's absolutely, I would say that part of that chosenness is, you know, to do, we have a task to engage in and engage with in the world, not simply to, you know, believe necessarily, right? I'm going to skip this piece because it's more in the vein that we were in with Isaac Mayer Weiss from very early late 19th century platforms of the Reform movement. I'm going to move on to this one piece from Leo Back, who says that Jews possess a special genius for ethical monotheism, which keeps the idea alive even today. Were the Jews in Judaism to disappear, ethical monotheism would lose its irreplaceable advocate and might itself disappear, right? Again, kind of back to Claudia, I think it was you that were talking about Jews being the first kind of monotheistic piece, right? And then here, this quote from a more contemporary, not the most contemporary, but certainly 20th century platform of the Reform movement, which I forget who said this, but right. Lisa Beth, you said this earlier, that right, a lot of us members of Reform congregations, and no one ever talks to us about like actually what is Reform Judaism and what do Reform Jews believe and stand for and all of that. So for what it's worth, I want to say there's four times, I believe it's 4 times, maybe 5 in the last 150 years or so. The Reform movement, organizations of the Reform movement, most recently the rabbinic governing body, the Reform movement, adopts and creates platforms and puts, pen to paper with ideology and things that we actually articulate that we do stand for and we do believe in. And what's interesting, if you really want to like go in the weeds and geek out on this, send me an email. I'll point you toward a few books, but to trace the radical change from, late 19th century to, I believe 1999 was the most recent adoption of new platforms. And it goes all the way from famously, right, in the late 19th century, a flat out rejection of anything that would be deemed particularistic. You got a little bit of a flavor of it in that Isaac Mayer Wise piece, right? But anything that was particularistic, right, in black and white ink, right, we reject. I believe the phrase was all such Mosaic rituals, right? Mosaic dress, right? That's why Edgar Magnin, talked about not wanting to wear a beanie on his head and would kick people out of the sanctuary, I'm told, for if they wanted to wear a talit, right? You get from there to 1999, in which you can go. Merle's been, others maybe also. You can go to a National Reform Movement conference go to a Monday morning Torah service and see people wearing tefillin, right? That's a pretty big evolution. But all of that saying, right? So here in the late 20th century, this notion again of kind of being chosen, being the idea of being chosen to do and to act and behave in a certain way, right? So I'll read this. Religious practice, Judaism emphasizes action rather than creed as the primary expression of religious life. I think that's a very fair statement. The means by which we strive to achieve universal justice and peace. Reform Judaism shares this emphasis on duty and obligation. Our founders stressed that the Jews' ethical responsibilities, personal and social, are enjoined by God. The past century has taught us that claims made upon us may begin with our ethical obligations, but they extend to many other aspects of Jewish living, including creating a Jewish home centered on family devotion, lifelong study, we're all making a big dent in that today, private prayer, and public worship. Daily religious observance, keeping the Sabbath and the holy days, celebrating the major events of life, involvement with the synagogue and community, and other activities which promote the survival of the Jewish people and enhance its existence, right? That's what, 45 years old, 46 years old? I personally would say that, to me, is still a pretty decent articulation, I would say, of what it is to be chosen to be Jewish, or what it is to choose to be Jewish.
And no mention of Israel.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. They're missing one big thing, right? Yes, no mention of Israel. That's fair. Israel did not make it. I believe, I have to actually go back and look. I believe Israel did make it back in to the 1976 platform, but not, you're right, not in this section, which is deemed religious practice. Claudia.
Hello, excuse me, one thing.
Risa, sorry.
Yeah. Stanley was the author of the Israel Zionism platform, which I don't think this was part of it, but it was in the 70s though.
Yeah.
So a very important pro-Aliyah statement was made.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's certainly right. Post-Holocaust, a lot of the ideas of like dual loyalty and, not being too supportive of Israel, went away. Absolutely. Right. And it just interestingly, because I'm kind of a geek on these things, and I was speaking about Edgar Magnin earlier, people, interestingly, he got a bad rap as being, anti-Zionist or anti-Israel in the first part of his rabbinate, which at least in all the reading and research I've done, it could not actually be farther from the truth. He absolutely supported Israel. He initially didn't necessarily think that it was the synagogue's place to be, fighting that fight. Again, that changed sort of in a post-Holocaust world, right? And I believe, right, it was Risa, your good friend, also Harvey Fields, Rabbi Harvey Fields of blessed memory, who wave Israeli flags in all of our sanctuaries now, thanks to him. Brad, and then Claudia.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on the fact that in Christianity as well, you have this concept of the chosen or the elect, and that is based on individual determinations, whether an individual performs good deeds, whether an individual is subject to the grace. They have this concept of grace, the grace of God, which sometimes is a mystery as to who is elected and who is not elected. But our concept of the chosen is that of a people. We are the chosen people. And that's what separates our concept of being chosen. And again, we are chosen to be in a particular kind of relationship with God. And it's a mutual relationship. It's one where we have obligations to God, but God also has obligations to us. And that is what's special about our concept of chosen, of being chosen.
Absolutely. I couldn't say that any more poetically. Claudia.
I just wanted to comment on how stark the differences between that Rabbi Wise, Isaac Wise, that we read about, and this letter from 1976. And I understand that the former was a product of the time of trying to fit in, because by standing out, we were not perceived as, doing ourselves any favor, and that our chosenness, our differences would be turned against us. So let's just try and fit in, which clearly did not work. So this, on hindsight, it feels to me that they looked back and said, well, it did not work. And it still doesn't work, because, there's a vast swath of the world that thinks of us as different, and in many ways, and still throws out there in our faces with this silly tropes that we're all familiar with. So I love this. Let's just embrace how we are different, and let's go for it. And I think you talked about Jews not doing a very good job at explaining ourselves to the outside world. And I think that's also part, I realized when I became a Jew, and most of my friends, in Italy are Christian or are nothing, how ignorant they are of, Judaism.
I would say absolutely. I would also say we generally don't do a very good job of explaining Judaism to Jews, frankly. The vast majority of, and this is not anyone's fault, but the vast majority of Jews, and I don't mean this as an insult to anybody, but the vast majority, certainly of non-Orthodox Jews, know very little about Judaism, right? And what they do know about Judaism is, largely a pediatric sort of understanding of Judaism, because most Jews stop learning or thinking much about Judaism, as an adolescent. And so when people come, and sit in my office and they're 30 and 40 years old and tell me they don't believe in God, I said, of course you don't, because you have a 12-year-old's understanding of theology. And you think God is a man with a white beard that controls everything that happens in the world. Well, I don't believe in that either, right? And of course, Judaism isn't incredibly meaningful to you because your understanding of it is a couple of holidays, that you learned about when you were in 6th grade, right? So I think, and that I think is on, the institutional Jewish world in large part. We haven't, obviously present company excluded, because here we are, talking about and learning about these things. But that's, I think, a big weakness. I heard Rabbi David Wolpe on a podcast, I don't know, a couple of years ago, say something that I thought was really, really interesting. I believe the question he was asked was, what did he see as a major challenge facing sort of Judaism and the Jewish people? And actually, maybe this is an interesting kind of note to sort of begin to conclude on. But he shared his experience going to the TED conference. For those, TED, it stands for Technology Education Design, I believe. And right, 18-minute TED Talks on all sorts of interesting, fascinating ideas out there. And he reflected that he was the only rabbi there, and that while there were plenty of people there who were Jewish, by and large, they were, we might call secular Jews, right? Not with a wealth of Jewish knowledge, but who were there with a wealth of knowledge about all sorts of fascinating ideas in the world. And he said the fact that in the Jewish world, we have a bunch of Jews who know a ton about Judaism, primarily in the traditional Jewish world, who would never set foot at a TED conference and engage with those ideas, and a bunch of Jews who are always at a TED conference, but rarely set foot in a synagogue and know nothing about the Jewish world, right? That divide is a challenge, right? Because if we can marry Jewish knowledge with, modern, contemporary, amazing ideas about technology and design thinking and where the world is going, that's an opportunity for the world. It's an opportunity for Judaism. It's an opportunity for everything, right? And I think it does speak to sort of this issue, which we keep coming back to, I think, in our conversation today, which part of the reason this is always fun for me is that I don't think I would have thought an hour ago that the notion of particularism is something that we would have really, spent so much time on. But I think it really is, in a way, at the core. I think that's what makes this idea of chosenness, I think, sometimes uncomfortable, is because we associate it with this idea of particularism. And to Lisa Beth's point earlier, I think we're living in a time in which we're made to think particularism is problematic, when I don't think it is, because I think that, right, particularism, differences, that it doesn't mean better or worse. Just because something is different doesn't make it better or worse, right? Just because we want to say, Brad, as you said so eloquently, that, the Jewish people are in a certain kind of articulated relationship, right? In which, there are demands placed on us if we choose to accept them, right? And we also have expectations of God and of, as well. That is in no way saying, well, that makes us better than our, Catholic brothers and sisters, or than our Muslim brothers and sisters. It's just a different relationship, right? The same way that, we got two kids, as I said, like, I love Simon to death, to pieces. It's the cutest little boy in the world. I love Evie to pieces. I have a different relationship with each of them. One's not better than the other, right? I'm pleased to know, I think, pretty well, all 24 of us here on the Zoom today, all of us have different relationships with each other, right? And we've known each other for different amounts of time. Again, I don't think one is better than the other, right? And I think the notion, the very Jewish notion, is that, and if we leave with one thought today, I would say that to be the chosen people is a responsibility more than a privilege, frankly. Right? It's and some of it, again, not Israel, but articulated reasonably well here in this platform from 1976. It's a responsibility to behave in a certain way in the world, to act in a certain way in the world, to take care of other people, right? And I'll end with the story, just which some have heard me share, but 10 years ago, something like that now, I had lunch at a cafe on Larchmont Boulevard with a Korean-American businesswoman who was then and still is the CEO of a federally qualified healthcare clinic that now operates the dental and vision services at the Karsh Center. And I explained to her what we were trying to do, which I think all of us are pretty well aware of, what we were trying to do in building the Karsh Center. And I finished and she looked at me and she said, okay, yeah, but like, why are you really doing this, Rabbi? Level with me. I was like, huh? She's like, no, come on. Like, what's the real reason you're doing this? And I said, I don't understand. To help people. She said, no, you're trying to make money. I said, no, this is going to cost us a lot of money, actually. She said, well, you're going to charge us rent. I said, no, I'm going to give you a key and ask you to help people. She said, well, you're only going to help Jews. I said, no. I said, we'll help anybody that comes in the front door, but it's probably going to be mostly non-Jews, if I had to guess. She said, well, you're going to teach them all about Judaism and try to convert them all. I said, you know enough about Jews to know that's not, what we do. And she said, why on earth are you doing this, right? And I said, because this is our job. Like, this is what we, by the way, not just the job of Jews, tons of other folks, religious and not, do lots of great things in the world to help people. And to be Jewish is to believe that we have an obligation and a responsibility to people who are less fortunate than we. And I would say that's part of what we're chosen for, right? Again, not in a better way than anyone else, but we have work to do. We have to make the world a little less broken, and to speak up for folks who are different, just like we are, and who are marginalized because of that, right? And that is, to be the chosen people is not to be off the hook when it comes to these big issues. So that ended on a little more of a sermonic note than I intended. But I appreciate everyone indulging me. Penina, I see your hand up. Maybe not. Okay. No.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm an Israeli. I was born in Israel, but I also studied a lot. And I'm here now for the last 48 years in the United States. I'm very proud of saying, when people are asking me what is my accent from, I proudly say I'm an Israeli. I was born in Israel, and that's my accent. And I want to tell you that from my studies, I learned from a rabbi by the name of Tzvi Yehuda, who was my teacher and a religious man, but very smart and open-minded. And one of the sentences that's in the Torah that says that "Ulezaracha natati et haaretz hazot," I'm going to give you and your seeds this land. The land was supposed to be the prize for Abraham following Judaism or Monotheism or the one God. Lecha natati et haaretz hazot, but I would give you that land, but that would be the prize for a certain behavior. There is a sentence also in the Torah that says, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. From Zion, the Torah will come out. Torah doesn't mean necessarily the 10 Commandments or the Torah that we are studying every day. Torah means studying, period, to learn. It's what you can teach or what you can be a model to, like you said before, to other people. And one example I'm going to give you, that the Syrian soldiers who their own doctors do not know what to do for them after they're being engaged in wars with Israel at the same time, are sending their very horrible, injured soldiers that they don't know what to do with them to the border, to Israel, to a hospital that is being built on the border so they could treat those Syrian soldiers who actually sent those rockets and those cannon thing to us. We treat them, they're being sent with tickets with no name, so their own families are not going to be accused in spying for Israel. That's why they sent the body, the sick person to Israel. They sent them unanimously with a ticket, blank ticket, with one sentence, see what you could do for them. And they're sending them to this Israeli field hospital. This is one example. And what we are contributing to the rest of the world, including the virus that is being now rampaging through the world. Israel gave their data initially to Pfizer And the CEO of Pfizer, who is a refugee, I mean, he is a son of Holocaust survivors, said that he wants to meet those scientists one day and go visit Israel when this whole thing will be over and traveling is not going to be so stressful, to meet those people and shake their hands for what they contributed. I listened to his speech that was done on YouTube and other places. So we are contributing to the whole world. Israel is making news now every time in the front pages that they're giving the second injection already, while everybody else is still seesawing whether or not. You know, we're doing amazing things. And Israel is considered to be now one of the richest countries in the world. And I never knew that myself. There was a list. Tel Aviv is now considered to be like Silicon Valley.
I read an article recently, which in some ways is depressing, but that Tel Aviv, the cost of living in Tel Aviv is far and away more expensive than Manhattan and
Jerusalem, don't even ask, in the millions. But that's not the point. The point is it doesn't happen because we are greedy. It happens because we did something good and it just brought good on us. You don't expect to get amazing stuff if you're doing horrible things. And not only that, we are entitled to a government. We are entitled to a president. We are entitled to be presented in the world with their own government, our own presidents, and that they could stand for us. And that's why I think is welcome in Israel.
100%. And I think, if I summed up much of the beautiful thoughts you shared in a phrase, I would say that it is, in a way, one could argue that to be chosen is to be responsible to think beyond ourselves.
Absolutely.
Rabbi?
And
Yes.
take care of ourselves also.
Miriam.
Rabbi?
Yeah, Miriam, go ahead.
Yes. I thought this was a wonderful session, as I think all your sessions are, by the way. And growing up in the conservative movement with some stress on yeshiva learning, etc., I even attended the College of Jewish Studies in the seminary many years before you were born. And Rabbi Heschel and Rabbi Kaplan were both my teachers and my personal friends.
Lucky you.
So absolutely very lucky. So what I've learned from you today is this. Not only you used the word obligation, and that goes a little further than responsibility. The word chosen did not ever mean that we were superior in any way. We were chosen for something specific. We were chosen for tikkun olam. We were chosen for responsibilities. We were chosen for mitzvot. But today, I will also include in my personal definition the word obligation. And that's what makes me not just a member of Hadassah, but a very active member to make sure that that new hospital is being built just by our little contributions.
Look, it is something, obligation, right? It's something I think that we're very uncomfortable with in our sort of modern.
I'm not. I've decided not to be uncomfortable.
And if you think about it, it's certainly from a traditional notion, Judaism is all about obligation. That's why we've got a bunch of commandments and laws and rules that, again, in the traditional Jewish world, it's not a choice. This is what you do and how you live and how you behave because God commanded you to live this way. And we lose sight of that, and we may choose, that we don't choose to obligate ourselves, to use a very Reformed Jewish phrase, but to obligate ourselves to kashrut or to Shabbat in the traditional sense or what have you. But I would say that very much a part of certainly the non-Orthodox Jewish world and the Reformed Jewish world is we absolutely obligate ourselves to think beyond ourselves and to care for those who are in need, and to advocate for issues that matter to us and matter to Jews and matter to the world. And so, yeah, it's many have said this, so I don't know who to attribute it to, but being a Jew is not easy, not for the faint of heart. But it's rich and it's meaningful, and that's what it is. I would say, to be chosen, it is to be obligated, it is to have responsibility, but it's not, it's not a gold star to put on the wall because we're better than everybody else. I think that's to end where we began. I think that's a simplistic and misunderstanding of. I understand why, but misunderstanding of the idea. We could go all afternoon. We've already gone over. I want to be respectful of people's time. Thank you all so much. So great to see everyone.
Thank you,
Shabbat
Rabbi.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
See you all soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Some good thoughts. Food for
Shabbat
thought.
shalom. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank
Shabbat
you all.
shalom.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.